because it was a cancellation of the event.
Old schools, those ones that are real old. Washington school, I could probably get in trouble with somebody, but the Washington school, I've been playing soccer inside with the kids. They had this one kid that I couldn't get it right. I only tried twice, because I tried hard.
Okay, well, welcome. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Personnel Subcommittee. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Chairperson Martin?
Here.
Ms. Doherty?
Here.
Mr. Hoey?
Here.
3 present.
Thank you very much. So we do have 2 topics of discussion. I would like to recommend that we take them out of order. So our first topic would be an update on the Human Resources Director search. We do have a report from the administration. If you could perhaps just kind of present us the highlights.
Hi. Tonight we're going to tell you what we have done so far with the Human Resource Director search and what we suggest from here. We did seek advice from the City Procurement Officer to make sure that we were in compliance with Chapter 30B, being that we were not sure of the price of this search firm. He suggested that we speak to the city HR department to find out what they do for high-level searches. And in this memo, you see this, the city HR department recommended MMA, SHRM, School Spring, City of Lowell website, etc. We also chose to request quotes despite the fact that there was an estimate of less than $10,000. With Chapter 30B, you have to just use best business practice for estimates less than $10,000, but we wanted to be thorough. We requested 11 rather than 3. And on the memo, you see that those include Robert Half, Ray Associates, K-12 Recruitment Group, MASPA, MASC, The LeapNet, iHire, Wilmot Associates, Bay State Search, and Talent Citizen. Of these, to date, we've only received 3 responses. 1 responded with an hourly quoted price. I believe that hourly rate, not the hourly rate, this daily rate is to show our advertisement on a certain site with the daily rate. The second quote was for 25% of the anticipated salary, which could be up, I mean, if we assume a $100,000 cost, that would be $25,000. Another recommended a flat fee of $14,000, which is that's comparable to 7.1% of a $100,000 salary. They stated in their proposal that this was a significantly reduced price, but they know our budget constraints, so that was the third. The other thing that we've done is we modified the job description to prepare a draft for today's school committee for your review. We use the HR audit results and samples from other communities to build this. We were hoping that whatever firm we chose could also review it and make sure that it's a thorough and reflective job description. So that's what we've done so far. We've modified the job description. We've reached out to 11 different firms and reached out to City Hall to see how they've conducted things. The next step that I would recommend is we should decide whether we want to wait until Friday to see if we have any other people submit a quote and then pick the lowest quote. Or 2, we could cancel this quote request and conduct the search ourselves using the methods used by the city with different posting sites, but that would mean we're conducting the search, not a search firm. Or 3, we could enter into a more extensive search for using a recruitment firm, but use a request for proposal bid process, which usually is only required for cost in excess of $50,000, but that would allow us to have more comparable quotes. Instead of someone sending something saying, here's a daily rate for advertising, we would actually specify the scope of work, and then they would all quote on the same thing. My recommendation, being that we're not getting a big turnaround, I wouldn't delay to do the extensive search if we're not getting responses now. I'm not sure that going out to the RFP process and waiting for all of the deadlines and postings and all that. But if we did do that, we would have to secure temporary assistance to help us through the hiring season.
So let's deal with that part first, and then we can take a look at the job description if that's okay with everyone. I don't know if there are any questions right off the... I had a couple, but I can wait.
Go ahead.
Okay. So looking at the 3 options, what is most appealing to me is the flat fee, obviously. I do think that, I really do think we need to have an external resource doing this search right now. I mean, just for a myriad of reasons, I think we need that additional help. Looking at the three responses, I mean, they're not out of, I mean, 25% of the salary is yeah, I mean, that's low.
No, I think it's high.
Do you really?
20% is more.
Oh, see, when I was doing it, it was like 33. It was a third.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's not, it's certainly reasonable. It's certainly in the realm.
It's not outrageous.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
But, a 7.1% I think is that's a real deal. I'm assuming that is someone with if they're actually recognizing our budgetary constraints, it's nice that a company would take that into account. Most wouldn't, so that's great. To me, that's the most appealing of the options right now. Doing a full-fledged, 50,000 plus bid, I mean, that's going to be at least a 6-week process, right? I mean, we cannot, to my way of thinking, take the time to do that. Yeah, and we may end up with the same exact, in the same exact circumstance. Are you confident? I mean, we don't know who anyone is, but are you confident in that bidder's ability?
I have to say that I was impressed with the response alone. Unlike the others that just would send a quote of 25%, this person or this company did list out what that would include.
Okay.
Almost like a scope of work that we did not provide in the,
Okay.
like a Chapter 30B RFP process. So I was impressed with that.
So in terms of being able to make a recommendation, my sense is that we can make a recommendation from the subcommittee, but the full committee will need to vote. Is it appropriate if we have that scope of service to be able to provide the committee at our meeting on Wednesday, so that we can present it as a recommendation of, I hope, the administration as well as the subcommittee, but give them the actual proposal to look at? Yes, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. It certainly is. We would also have any additional quotes that might have come in.
Come in by Friday?
By Friday. So,
Oh, good.
that being said, that's definitely doable.
So perhaps for full, openness, if we provide all 3 of the responses in the packet, so that everyone can see those, and then we can take that final vote with the committee having the full information. Yes, Ms. Turner.
I also will call the other 8 and even, just encourage them or remind them that the deadline is Friday, so that if we can get more in there, we can.
Okay, that would be great. That's over and above. That's great. Mr. Hoey.
Just one quick question, and number 1 on this update search there, the city's HR department, these are the things they use here. Have you checked in to see how helpful that would be for us if we use the same type of people that they've used?
Well, I did look at these places, but some of these organizations that we reached out to originally with our first round of requests did not respond. These are actually job posting sites, so whoever we do choose as our search firm, we can recommend that they use these as well, because they don't have to just use the sites that they would use. We could add these as well.
And I like that flat fee one. If I had to pick one out of the 3 too, that's the one that I think I'd be interested in. So thank you.
Ms. Doherty.
Not much more to add, except that I think that in terms of our ability to move forward, we really can't award it until Wednesday at the earliest anyway. So the more information we have in front of us for Wednesday's meeting, the better off we're going to be. So we can make the decision right then, Wednesday night, who we're going to go with. I agree with what's been said, that we do want to go with an outside, we need that help. Specifically for this role. And I'd be interested if any of these firms, it's not a requirement, but obviously if they have experience, proven expertise in the education space and also with diverse hiring. I mean, that would be something that would be of interest to me too.
Okay.
Mr.
Thing that I'm not sure of the initials of the it's not Massachusetts Association of School Committees, but it's something like a management department in the state that they've talked to a lot of people about the compensation for the city of Lowell, the size of our city. And I don't know all the names of who looked into it, but I think the price was more, the average price, what they are recommending, we should look, is around $125,000 to get the person we need. I'm saying those numbers, when I look at 95 to 115, it just might, to me, we're not giving, it's like the superintendent in the city. They don't really get paid as much as people think they get paid. If you look, to my opinion, if you look at Billerica, you look at small cities, they might only get $175,000. But if you look at all their perks, a lot of times they're making more than a city like Lowell. And it's hard to find superintendents that want to come here because I think the problem is money. And I feel the same thing about the HR department. And I'm not saying 125 should be our starting price, but I think that's something, the salary we have to adjust as a school committee. And I just wanted to bring it up. Thank you very much.
So basically, on Wednesday night, we'll have this posting, which now we can move on to talk about, because that you're looking at, that has that range, so that we'd be able to have that conversation on Wednesday night. I'm sorry, comments?
Thank you.
Durkin.
I just wanted to state that what we tried to do with the latest rendition of the Director of Human Resources job posting is we specifically went page by page through the human resource audit, and we looked at the recommendations that were in front of us. We had a discussion about whether the recommendations and the data that we had correlated with what the findings were, and we agreed that those needs needed to be brought forward. So we made sure that we put in those specific items that were from the HR audit, and then as Ms. Turner mentioned, we also pulled from a number of other job postings from across, schools around the state and elsewhere. So we feel like, again, this is a draft, and we certainly welcome feedback, but we think that when you hear, and it would have the HR audit findings, that you'll see that some of the same things are aligned in there.
Can I ask, is there a DESE licensure or certification for an HR director within a school district? I didn't believe there was one, but...
Just the director.
So they have to be a director level?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of HR directors have a school business administrator license. It's business or personnel management.
Okay. Okay, because one of the, as I'm looking at the job description, the experience working with the DESE as it pertains to licensure and whatnot, I mean, that is limiting. I mean, and we've talked about our willingness to entertain a different type of candidate, yes.
Yes, that's not somebody who's certified. We removed anything that was specific to that they needed an education licensure.
Okay.
This is to work with our staff, and we wrote preferred.
Yes.
Okay,
So
yeah,
we were
which
very
I'm fine with,
careful
okay.
to make sure that we said it would be nice if someone had it, but we would
Which is-
not, that would not be the defining factor.
I think that's excellent. My only other comment, too, on this professional qualifications listing, I think we really do want to drill down. I know that we're looking at, and I think it's the second thing, so that's great, qualified experience and diverse teachers and leaders in every school. There was language that had come out of our meeting on Monday, remember way back when on Monday when we met the last time, around cultural competencies, and it also harkened back to the diversity issue. I thought the wording that was put together was very effective. If we could perhaps mirror that here. Whether it's a separate bullet point or not, I don't really care, but I think that would be, particularly around the cultural competency language, because I think that means something that is important for us to be aware of. I will also say, to Mr. Hoey's point, I understand his concerns. I personally am comfortable at the 95 to 115 range, so we'll have that conversation on Wednesday. I do think for this, I think that's a significant salary. So I that's where at this point, I'm comfortable. We'll certainly have the conversation, and then we can determine where we go from there. Any other questions, concerns around the actual job description?
Do we need a formal motion?
I would entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress and recommend to the full school committee on Wednesday evening the recommendations of the administration in this committee to move forward with one of the options that we will all be presented with on that Wednesday night, so everyone will be prepared, hopefully, to have already reviewed that, and to recommend the job description with the changes that have just been discussed. So there's the motion. Good luck with it.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Hoey, seconded by Ms. Doherty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's happening.
Oh, don't even, because... Okay, well then, timing is everything, so, I'm sorry? So we've completed that second item, we can now segue back to the, we're going to be getting a report on the human resources audit that was forwarded to the committee a little while ago, about a month ago, I guess. So can you do that introduction?
Certainly, thank you. So if everyone recalls, in the fall, early fall, we initiated during leadership with all of our principals, the Human Resource Services audit, and what they launched at that time was surveys of all of our leaders, and you can see in the audit report the actual survey results that are in the back of the audit. But here tonight, at the request of the committee, is Sandra Stachinsky to share with you some of the findings of the final report, and her colleague.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Superintendent Durkin.
You need to hit your microphone.
Oh,
It'll
how's
turn
that?
green when you...
I did press it. I push the light's on.
Perfect.
Can you
You're
hear me
all
now?
set. Yep.
All right. So thank you very much for inviting us. And I'm Sandy Stepchinsky, President of Human Resources Services. And this is my husband, Buzz, and he actually works with my company now. He's a retired town manager. And so I've had this business for 35 years. And we provide technical assistance to cities and towns and school districts, primarily in Massachusetts, in all areas of HR management. So we are very knowledgeable of HR and local government and school districts, and so we understand the positions and the uniqueness of local government. So we did an audit for the school district. We were contacted, I think, by the former HR director, Mulligan, Sue Mulligan. And we then developed a contract with the city. What I'd like to do is, what I wanted to do today is just go over with you the methodology and then the findings. I didn't know what your pleasure was, if you wanted me to do that, or if you preferred to just ask me questions on the study. So whatever you would like, whatever your pleasure is, I can do it either way, because I know we have limited time.
I do think we'd benefit from having you walk us through the methodology and
Okay.
the actual findings of the audit, and then I think we'll leave time certainly for questions. but-
Yeah, and we're happy to stay as long as it's snowing, so it's not a problem.
We may be here for a while.
I had an RFP come across my desk today from Bangor, Maine, and I said, no, thank you. I come to Lowell anytime.
That's great, see?
So,
We're better than
anyway,
Bangor.
The methodology is a methodology, by the way, that we have successfully used in many other school districts. And we've worked in other school districts similar in size to Lowell. One that comes to mind is Newton Public Schools, and we've done some work in the city of Boston before. We've done some work for Plymouth Public Schools that has 2 high schools. So we've done some big school projects. So at the very beginning of the study, we conducted these orientation sessions with the leadership team to inform them about what the purpose of the HR audit was and how important it is to have these HR systems in place. And it was kind of a different orientation, because I think that the educators have a lot of training on the educational requirements, but this was more of an administrative type of HR, a different thing for them to think about and to look at, but it affects all of them as they are hiring, employees. So there were about 50 or 60 professional staff that we had done the orientation, and there were 2 sessions, and this sort of was the kickoff of the study. And then what we did at that meeting, we distributed custom survey instruments to the staff, because, and it was on a volunteer basis, whoever wanted to participate in this confidential survey. And we got, I thought, a reasonable response. We got a significant amount, enough for our analysis. And those were given to us directly. We also did the audit, the actual checklist audit with the HR department. We worked very, very closely with the HR staff and with the school administration to, dig into, to do a little bit deeper dive into the auditing of the HR operations. So we also conducted interviews. So we had select interviews that we did. We did sort of a cross-section within your organization of the key positions that are either directly involved with HR or sort of touch HR. And, so there were a cross-section of department heads, principals, employees, the acting superintendent of schools, the interim assistant superintendent for finance, the human resource director, the assistant human resource director, the HR executive assistant, the HR head clerk, the city's, HR director. And so we gathered information. These were confidential interviews. And then we regularly benchmark, other, internally, we regularly have information from other school organizations and other municipal organizations. So we looked at that internally. So we also gathered a lot of documentation and information from the HR department and from finance and from the superintendent on everything from policies to personnel forms to job descriptions, a wide variety of compliance materials and documents that we wanted to examine closely. And so we also considered, best management practices. We have that through, our years of experience, and also by working, with municipalities, and we're members of SHRM and the American Society, MASPA. We're also members of the Economic Research Institute and Mass Municipal Personnel Association, and there's a lot of, and ICMA, a lot of different organizations, and then, the chambers and so forth. So we were able to benchmark and also do some research, understanding DESE and their organization and so forth. So we evaluated all the management systems in place. So we evaluated what you currently had, what you didn't have, And we also coupled that with the HR audit. So it was sort of threefold. It was the internal survey with the staff, with the leadership, whoever wanted to participate. So I think we got about 30 responses, I think. And then we also conducted the interviews. The interviews were key. We gathered additional information. And then looking at, documentation. Then we also conducted the audit, the actual audit, and it is attached here. There's all kinds of audits. I mean, we did sort of an overview audit. Each one of these items on your audit, you could do like a 10-page audit just on every single item within this audit. So, we did sort of an overview because there were so many things that we had to look at. But for example, you could do an audit just on pay equity alone, and that could be like a 20-page audit. So we didn't do that deep dive like that. We were, limited with the funds that we had. This was a $10,000 project, so we had to work within that. But we got very good information, for you. So I wanted to go over now some of the recommendations. And throughout this whole process, we had meetings with HR and with the superintendent, but your organization is huge. I mean, you have like 3,000 estimated Lowell public school employees to serve. That is huge, and you have to be a partner with all of these departments, and you are a decentralized, you're a decentralized organization because you have, I don't know how many buildings you have, like 20, 25? 30, I'm sorry, I always forget. 30 buildings. I can't seem to fathom that. That's a lot to manage. So when you have employees in all of those places, and you really need to have a full-time HR director with appropriate staffing under that position, and you also need to have the appropriate technology. You just can't do this. One of the things that we found was that, the technology was really not there yet. You have a lot of technology, but there's more that you could get. Munis, for example, has an HR component, that you could get to add. We talked about that, and I don't know if the city is thinking about getting it, but that would be a great benefit, to have here. But getting back to the organization, the first recommendation would be to hire the HR director, and we recommend a salary that would be above $100,000. I mean, we recommend, I heard you talk about the salary, and I really, professionally, we always study HR all over every city and town in Massachusetts, and I really think it's going to be very hard to find somebody at $95,000 today. So you might want to rethink that. It is such a key position. It is such an important position. And when you think about it, to be able to manage the compliance and the risk is huge. I mean, the risk is enormous. So, maybe you're going to pay, say you paid between $125,000 and $130,000. But it might cost you, it might save you the cost of legal fees or a lawsuit or something, because things are not, being managed correctly. So, think about that. That coupled with the, the technology, we recommend the human resource information system, and that is paramount. I mean, when you think about the pieces of data that you have, and now with the new pay equity law, you can't do that by hand. I mean, you have to have everything. And you do have, I know you have a number of systems in place, but it just doesn't, it's not all united, it doesn't pull it all together. So you need to look at that and to really look at a number of vendors. I'd recommend that maybe you issue a request for information to get different quotes for people on what an HRIS system would cost, or maybe you could do it with the city. The assistant HR director is a key position. Also, you have the executive assistant, HR administrative support specialist. We know that, you know, it's expensive to bring on additional staffing, and one of the things that we found that is really necessary is basically to have somebody, you know, maybe who can coordinate with the schools. And maybe at each school, you can develop the HR expertise. It's virtually impossible for one office and central office to manage all of HR for 30 buildings with 3,000 employees. So you need to develop the HR role in each of those schools, and it could be using staff that already exists. It could be an assistant principal, or it could be you know, an executive assistant, or someone who could also take on some additional staff role. And what it would also do is provide some career opportunity for employees that are already here. And what I would recommend in the central office is that you have somebody who would be like the human relations assistant, and this person, their sole responsibility would be coordinating with all of these other HR roles in all the 30 schools. And that would involve coordinating training classes, you know, ensuring that the hiring process is consistent and throughout the whole organization, you know, to assist with attendance tracking. And really, this human relations person would serve as a strategic partner with all the HR school technicians, the school HR technicians, that's what I call them, in all the other schools. So this is something, you know, I know will take some work to develop, but we felt it was the most cost-efficient way to do it, to try to utilize the staff that you currently have. And we all know that there are superstars in every organization, and there might be someone who wants to take on this additional role, and some of them may already be doing it already. There could be in these schools people who are, I bet there are, who are already doing it. So just kind of formalizing that process. Now, in our review of everything, we found that the communications need to be better improved throughout, you know, the school district with HR. We did get some feedback that there were some communication issues, and you know, and certainly with the limited staff that you have in HR, I mean, that, you know, that's what's going to happen, you know, if you don't have the appropriate staffing in place. So so you have, I think, dedicated staff in HR, but there's just not enough of them, you know, and it's humanly impossible for them to answer everything in a timely way. So you know, there is you know, a lot of requests we found from department schools that need with regard to hiring, retirement, termination, discipline, the mass teachers retirement system, just a lot of things, and the response is slow. And why is it slow? Because you don't have the systems in place. So you need to have those systems in place, and some of that can be answered, believe it or not, with technology too. If you have the proper technology and everybody's tied into it. So better communication, better interface also with the city's HR department is important, the school department with the city's HR. So oftentimes, the city's HR is not aware of certain basic information. So without getting into a lot of detail, so that's an area. We talked about developing the HR role in each school. And then I've got, the workflow and technology, like many other schools and organizations, the Lowell Public Schools uses a variety of databases, such as X2 Aspen and, School Spring, and you utilize Munis for financial. So the human resources aspect is it appears only to be partially automated, and so you're using more spreadsheets and things like that. So it would be important to have that HRIS technology, and that will help with the workflow, because there seems to be a lag in terms of information flowing back and forth from the schools, and it makes some of the leaders, not everyone, but makes some of the leadership frustrated, that things are not handled more quickly. The other thing that I'd like to mention that, is, hiring, diversity and succession planning. The hiring process is a multi-step and cumbersome process, and overall it seems to be, it is computerized to a certain extent, but a lot of it is manual, and it seems like there's a perception, there was a perception out there that not everybody was doing the hiring the same way, So we strongly recommend that the policy for hiring be strengthened, and more better guidelines and training for people. And this is, no fault of the HR staff or anything. It's just, again, it's just that the system needs to be enhanced a little bit so everybody is on the same page with hiring, and people know and hear about when openings and things like that. The diversity issue is something not only in Lowell, but in a lot of other communities are struggling with too. It's very hard to recruit diverse work as much as you want it. It's very hard to get that work pool. So we offered some suggestions in our report, and maybe in your organization you have some paraprofessionals now coming up through. So the coordinators coming up through the system who are more diverse, and maybe offering them some opportunity to advance right in your own organization. And developing a succession plan that makes sense. There seems to be, I guess, a policy in place that you always have to hire from within the city, and that can hurt actually the ability to reach out to diverse employees. So I don't know what would be involved to change that, but just something to look at. And things such as exit interviews and training for the HR departments. Training is so important and so needed, and now there's a lot of training that you can do online and through webinars. Our company actually does that. We do it pro bono for, an organization, the ICMA, and we do these HR trainings, and people from all over the country can chime in, and it's really inexpensive. You can, for a few $100s, you can get a whole bunch of people in a room, and they can have this training session. So there's a lot of training in HR that affects your employees, and with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Labor Standards Act, and the Family Medical Leave Act, and all kinds of things. Even when they're interviewing, do they know what they should and should not ask? And, so there should be training for the department heads, skills, conducting performance evaluation, sexual harassment. I know you're doing training, a lot of training in that. Progressive discipline and, FMLA, hiring and firing, the proper way to do that so you don't have wrongful termination lawsuits and things like that. HR records and retentions and just knowledge about the new laws in Massachusetts with, there's the new Pregnancy Act law, where you have to provide a lactation room and things like that. And so, so a lot of training we found would be helpful. We didn't see that being done. A lot of the training is more student-based HR. So, for example, say you have to restrain a student, what's the proper way to do that so there's not a problem? It's more, you do a lot of great training in that regard, with that are student-based type of, training. But, the general administrative type HR, there's really not a lot of training in that, except for the major areas like FMLA and sexual harassment and things like that. One of the items now, because of the new MEPA law, the Massachusetts Employment Pay Act, the state is encouraging a lot of organizations to update their job descriptions and to do a job analysis and to do an updated classification system. You do have job descriptions and you do have pay plans and so forth, but it wouldn't, even for, it would not hurt, especially for the non-union positions, to do an updated compensation and classification plan and to do a gender analysis organization-wide to ensure equal pay for equal work. So that you might want to consider that in the future. And although the teachers have a great performance system that's standardized through the state, there are certain groups of employees where performance systems do not exist, and so we recommend for those particular groups we identified in the report. And then, employee safety in the workplace. So that is another area. Now, see, Massachusetts now is covered by OSHA, so better guidelines as it relates to safety training for employees, and I'm sure you have some of that going on already. And then we've got attached here a very comprehensive HR audit list, and wherever there's a blank, wherever there's a dot, it means that it is taking place. Wherever there is a blank, it means it's not, but that's not, don't be alarmed by that. We do these audits everywhere. Nobody gets everything 100%. So think of it as a way to enhance your organization and areas where you can, improve. For example, a written compensation administration program does not exist. So that would be something, to strive for. Just a variety. When you go through here, the way that it's set up, the audit looked at employment, it looked at reference background checks, the state posters that you need to have up, just cause termination, what you need to include in your main personnel file, what you keep in separate files, sexual harassment prevention, benefits, training, grievance, discipline and termination, compensation, policies, the other school compliance items related were listed here. It looks like your policies you have a lot of policies in place. But, how they are communicated to the departments is also important, and making sure that there's appropriate training. But when you go through this, safety rules, our school premises. So there's a lot of, good information in here if you read through it. But again, it's not intended to be critical, but just areas where you could enhance. And then we also added the employee survey stats and all the different responses to that are included in here and graphed. And there's some, narrative items in here from, certain employees that we do not name. So there's some, and some people felt, that they were well serviced by the HR department. I think, what was lacking is, communication, workflow, and timeliness. Being able to fill these positions, it's critical for these schools to be able to fill these jobs when they're open. So when there's a lag and a slowdown, that really hurts them. So that's something, looking at your hiring policies and updating those is very important, and providing very strict guidelines with all of the departments. So I worked closely with our team, and they're listed here in the report. Myself, Buzz, Carol Granfield was also a senior advisor, and Elizabeth Mensinger was an analyst and helped us with a lot of the data analysis. So we had a good-sized team for you, and I think we've provided you with a nice blueprint. So when you have that new HR director come on board, he or she are going to have their hands, they're going to have their work cut out for them, right? And so I don't know, Buzz, if you wanted to say anything else. Yep. So anyway, so I guess I'll just take some questions from you at this time, because I know you wanted to ask some deeper questions. So.
Out of the gate, I'll ask. Thank you very much for the report. I do think that there was some really valuable information in it, so I really appreciated the work that had gone into it. To my way of thinking, and I asked this as a question, we're really in a position, I feel, where we're rebuilding this office almost from scratch. I mean, almost from the ground up. In my kind of professional experience, my approach in this would be to find the right, inspired, talented, high-quality leader, and then let that person kind of build the rest of their team. I mean, that's been my own approach, that you need that strong leader in place so that as they're making these hires of an assistant, or if we can make it happen, which is a question, that secondary, the secondary kind of support person in addition to the one who's already there, so that they're setting out their priorities for those positions based on their own strengths and weaknesses. So my sense is that our first step really needs to be this initial hire of the director, and then maybe arming that person with the audit so that they have the information, but then allowing that person to kind of chart the course for hiring and for investigations into software. I am really hoping that the person who comes into this position has a strong enough HR background that they'll be able to make some recommendations, or at the very least be able to look at, Munis, if that can work for us, that's great. But I think we need to have a director in place who can look at it to determine if it will, meet our needs. The idea of bringing in yet another software system that's exclusive to HR, in addition to School Spring and Aspen and X2 and all the other all the other different, kind of technologies that we rely on in a lot of different ways. Bringing in one more just seems a bit onerous, but that's me. So I guess I'm asking, am I right in assuming that we need to kind of populate this first position before we can really take any strong action on the rest of these items?
Yes, I think you don't have a choice. I think because, you need to have, an HR director in place that can do a lot of these. I mean, if there are any serious compliance items through the audit, you don't want to let those lapse. So on those items, you don't want to, you want to have that corrected as soon as possible. But with regard to a lot of the, other recommendations, a good majority of the audit and the recommendations of the assessment, it would be ideal if you could get the HR on board and then work with them, to build help them be supportive so they can build their staff and build their organization and do. But you will need to pay good money to get somebody good. So I just wanted to, put that out there because, I wouldn't recommend, I do a lot of compensation work. That's a big part of our practice, and I know how difficult it is to recruit these people. And, you need somebody that understands local government too and how to work in a local government context. So if you brought somebody in just from the private sector, it would take them some time, I think, to get caught up. So you want to have a good salary with the right background and, understand the school district. So, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. So anyway, so that and it looks like you've got a good job description that you're working with, and that was put up. Have you started? You're looking at firms to do the recruitment? Yeah, good. It will help. That will help you. And there are people who might specialize in HR recruitment, so that would be good for you. Yeah. So, but it's.
I'd just like to make one comment. I appreciate all the work you did with this audit. Now, you and Buzz, are you from Andover?
Yeah.
Okay, so be careful going home. But what you really did, to me, is you reinforced what a lot of us already knew. I mean, being short-staffed inside the HR, not having a director, number one, not having enough secretaries. But some of the information that I've already heard in your explanation of everything tonight was impressive to me, and I appreciate all the work, because this is a big issue for the city. HR, we have a lot of big issues in the city right now, but this is one of the top three, definitely. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Actually, I've got a couple of questions regarding the audit itself, and then I wanted to kind of end up with just a thought going forward for us. One of the things that I've been really interested in is our use of the interview panels. And I noticed that you mentioned it, we do it for the, I think we've done it for teachers too. We have these screening groups. The community group might have a parent, administrator. And you talked a little bit about how they've been effective for the Lowell public schools, but there was no consistency in the makeup of the panels.
Yes.
And you specifically mentioned having union representation on the panel.
Yeah.
What else did you feel wasn't consistent about the makeup of the panels? And the part I'm really interested in is the role the panel plays in moving candidates forward. And in your experience, how strong of a role is that these community groups, screening committees, whatever you want to call them?
They're really important, and I actually participated in one time, at our school. The principal there knew I had an HR background, and she invited me to be on a panel when they were hiring. Actually, no, it was the superintendent. They were hiring a principal for an elementary school. So, yeah, you just want to make sure you have the same kind of makeup. So you say, okay, we'll always have, you know, a department head, we'll always have union representation, maybe a citizen, you know, that it's always, you know, consistent. That was our notion, just from talking to people and through interviews and information that we received, we learned that the makeup was, while the panels are very, very good and they're effective, the makeup of them was not consistent. So that's all, we just wanted to make a comment of that. And you would want to have union representation, I think, on them, so, yeah.
And I mean, I guess from my perspective, looking at how the panel, it's people putting in a lot of their own time.
Yes.
And then if they recommend, let's say, these 3 people to move to finalist stage, you know, to me, it's important that those 3 people move to the finalist stage, that the people who participate in the panel know that, you know, their work and their effort, you know, has been appreciated and valued. You also mentioned doing exit interviews, which I think is a great idea, but frankly, I don't see how we would have the time for that. And you talk about...
You can do them online. You can do it online.
Right. I was going to say, how effective do you think because that is something I think we could institute, an online survey that's...
Oh, it's very effective. It's very effective because a lot of times you'll learn something about, you know, an organization that you didn't realize that you need to know about. And if you do it online, I mean, you can't do in person. That would be virtually impossible. But you could do an optional exit interview online, and you might get some very good insight. And it could also help you for refilling the position, too, and things
I mean, that was one of the things that jumped out at me that we could implement.
Oh, yeah, you could do that.
Wait until we get a new director in. But, you know, because some of this, just in the realm of our budget constraints, like adding the staff, or, you know, even another part that I want to touch on.
And can I just say also on that before we go ahead? You know, sometimes what comes out of that is the employee says, gee, I wish I had more training in this, or I wish I had, you know, the ability to advance or whatever, you know, so those kinds of professional development things come out as well. So I'm sorry.
Oh, great. No, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was the whole issue with our policies and people knowing our policies.
Yeah.
And I know that I thought it was like a 900-page document of all our policies. Is that online yet?
Yes.
It is. So I think that trying to circle back to some of the, you know, deficits that you found in the audit about communication, strengthening our policies, and really in the training that goes, I really see an intersection there of those 3 areas where we could, you know, I think we've got some excellent policies in place already, not that there isn't always room for improvement, but to, you know, combine those 3 points as a way to move forward as a district. And then I had, my last question just come out of my head. And it really has to do with how we move forward in this role, the HR director role. We've tried to, as you know, we've updated the job description. We're still in the process of getting the full committee behind those changes. We're putting things like that education experience be, you know, the DESE experience be preferred. You know, we want to put stuff in about cultural competency and, you know, having experience with diverse hirings and working with diverse community and diverse staff, all those things, all those pieces. And I'm just wondering from your experience, what you feel is the learning curve if we were looking at somebody who was strong HR, but really didn't have the DESE experience, hadn't been in a school environment, as opposed to, you know, but had strong HR, organizational understanding, and management and that, like, how would you weigh out, because we want to cast a wide net. We don't want to limit someone and say, you have to have this certification, you have to have a DESE background. But we recognize the challenges of walking into a district as complex as Lowell is. I think it's a wonderful school district. Our demographics are truly diverse, our students are incredible, all those things, but it's a challenging role, and you can't really learn on the fly. So I just would like your thoughts about how
Sure.
we're balancing out, the preferred with with maybe someone who doesn't have this preferred but is strong in this other area. How would you frame thinking about that from your
Well,
expertise?
I think the ideal candidate should have municipal experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be DESE, but they have to know how local government works. I think if you bring somebody in here in an organization as complex as the Lowell Public Schools, and they've never worked in the public sector, I think it'll be a huge learning curve. Say they came from IBM or some company like that. It would be very foreign and very different, and I do think it would be a learning curve. So you want them, they don't have to have school district, but at least to have municipal experience, so they understand, what a school committee is, and they understand what a city council is, and they understand, what the finance director's office does. So, and what civil services, and what unions are. You need somebody with knowledge of unions. And then so that would be number one. Now, if you had a superstar, somebody who came from the private sector and they were so outstanding in everything, but they didn't have the municipal, they would have to have a lot of staff around them, who have that municipal experience. But I personally wouldn't recommend anybody without municipal experience,
May I chime in?
Sure.
I like to chime in. I don't mean to disagree with the boss, but at the risk of not disagreeing with the boss, but just expanding on that, I think that, Sandy, municipal is a little limited, and I do quite a bit of recruitment and selection for the firm. And one of the things that we have tried to do is reach out to state government for town administrators, town managers, DPW directors, finance directors, positions of that sort, not necessarily HR directors, but the state, the colleges, the university system, huge, absolutely huge. And, we've had individuals, not from this area, but from UMass Lowell, apply for town administrator's job, and you'd think, gee, why would somebody who is an administrator at UMass Amherst think he or she could be a town administrator? Well, once you get into their resume and the background, they're dealing with unions, they're dealing with complex budgets, they're dealing with boards or committees or commissions, that sort of thing. So even though, it wasn't, she wasn't, well, I'm thinking of a particular individual, but he or she wasn't, the assistant town manager in Amherst, this individual had a depth and breadth of experience that, when you went through it, was impressive. So, I may pay for this, but I think, the state, local
okay.
government.
So I'm gonna, do I get a rebuttal? So I think so you could do municipal government, even public universities, but I think when you start looking at the hardcore, companies like Teradyne or IBM or, GE or, I think it's so incredibly different. But when you're looking at state government or municipal or even universities, public universities, it's, but anybody, I guess, your question was the learning curve. So to answer that, someone obviously from the public sector would have less of a learning curve. Someone from the private sector, I think, would have to go at least through one whole cycle, of a whole fiscal year to understand, wouldn't you? It would go through to understand, but, so that's, the best person would be somebody from a school. I mean, that would be the most ideal, and.
No, and I understand your point. I will say, I'm going to disagree with you even more than your husband, so
Okay.
I may save you on the way home. I'm here to help. My approach in all this, and professionally, I work in a nonprofit, and I've worked in a nonprofit environment, and I've had really bad experiences with both, particularly in HR, with people coming in from the for-profit, from traditional businesses coming in, and not being able to make the transition to kind of the different mindset and that's just from my own nonprofit, that world, which is different even still from the kind of municipal school world. But we've also had the experience of having people who came in from Fidelity or Staples, and they've worked in a very traditional business environment and came into the nonprofit world, and there was absolutely a learning curve, but we're able to make the transition. My biggest concern in moving to the direction of looking for someone who has this exact school experience, municipal experience, I think that those systems of HR are particularly prone to bureaucracy and a kind of lack of inspiration. And I don't mean that to be disparaging, even though I know it sounds that way. But I think that municipalities and school districts are, by their very nature, set up to be kind of overly structured, and there is a checklist, and there is, in HR, I know it's a fundamental function of HR to be able to check every box and always say no to things. My HR director I'm lucky she doesn't live in Lowell and isn't watching this, because that's what she always says to me is no when I want to do something. But I just think that that's the approach, and it's not even good or bad. I mean, there's laws and regulations that HR professionals who kind of come up through that system absolutely learn and have to understand. And I think we need people in the office who do that. I mean, maybe that's the role of the assistant director or, in some other way. But I just feel like we're at this turning point in our district where we're looking for an HR director who really has some inspirational ideas of new ways to do things that we don't know. I mean, that I don't know living in a nonprofit world, that we don't know living in a municipal world, that, there could be some silver bullet that we've been struggling to find, that maybe this could be the moment when it happens. So I agree. I mean, we need someone with a strong, I'm excited about the idea of someone with a strong vision, but I also recognize we need someone with the nuts and bolts. I'm not looking for, the Wizard of Oz to come up from behind the curtain. And I mean, I know we need someone who is substantive and has a strong background. I'm not as married to the idea of someone who's been an HR director in a slightly smaller district moving into this position to do the same thing they did here. But thank you. So you might be fine on the right home.
Well, but
Here to help.
He gets a brownie.
what you want is a leader.
Yeah.
You want an HR leader.
I just wanted to say that prepared for the Wednesday meeting, we have a response of what we have done so far to each of these items. As you know, this was done based on the previous systems and administration. So we have put things in place to address each of these. And as you said, this is an ideal world, and it may cost a lot. So what I've done is given you we've suggested things in lieu of all of the hires until we do have enough money to make those hires. So I'll share that on the Wednesday meeting. And I just wanted to say, I do agree that it would be ideal to have someone with a teaching background, but I also agree that if you hire a doctor, and as long as you have that solid medical background, you can kind of lean them toward different things, but you can't teach someone to be a doctor. So I agree that a strong HR candidate would be better than someone in a school, especially since there's probably only one per district, where if you go without a school experience, you can reach out to a far broader audience.
So, Mr. Hoey and then
Thanks.
Ms. Doherty.
Just so you know, a few of your things I've already tried to bring forward, like exit interviews, I love that.
Yeah.
And there was a few things, but we don't want to bring too many things forward for an HR department that doesn't have enough staff right now.
Right.
But what I would like to maybe see if Buzz could answer this, did you say you were a city manager before?
I was town manager
Town
in
manager.
in Andover for 25 years before they,
In Andover, too, so beautiful. You might be able to help us on my issue. We've been having a problem in this city, and it's not unique. I think a lot of cities have problems when you have 3,000 jobs or pensions. Everybody's looking for a job. So it puts a lot of pressure on someone that's in that position. So my thing is, I think we need to find a different way. And when one of my colleagues just now was talking about like committees and search committees, we've been doing the same type of committees for the past maybe 20 years. The people that are put on those committees. So where we've had a hard time over these years trying to get some stability in that job, I'd love to know what we can do to take the pressure off people that are constantly looking for a job. It goes to state reps, it goes to school committee, people constantly calling all of us, and all we can say is, I can't get you a job. Try to get you an interview. I know what I did in a few years back to make sure anybody from Lowell gets a final interview. But there's some things we have to look at and do it differently, because I'm not sure if every city's like this, but we have a lot of problems when it comes to, I don't know, political battles, let's say. Let me put it that way. But it's part of this, there's no doubt.
well,
Thank you.
You're not alone. That's very typical in municipal, state jobs, even in the private sector, calls get made. But I think the issue, wherever you're at, public sector, private sector, the not-for-profit sector, are good rules, policy procedure that's in place, that's honored, that's respected, and that's followed. Sounds pretty simple, but I know it's not.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, sorry, I have one more question that had to do with the audit.
Okay.
And I actually can't find where my note is, but it was, you mentioned that, it's a cumbersome system. The way we are hiring people is cumbersome. And I just thought, could you elaborate a little bit more on I think you mentioned something about different roles maybe would have a different process, of hiring process, like if it's a teacher versus a maintenance worker, or, I just wanted to, and I know this is off the top of your head, I can't find where it is in the report, but I remember thinking, if we could streamline processes, especially when we're limited with staff, it makes a lot of sense. So I just wanted to know what kind of comes to the top of your mind.
Yeah, I'm just
when
trying
you
to
think
remember
about
what I meant
was
by that.
cumbersome
I think,
about-
I think that what I was referring to is that the process is not consistent. Okay, so there was a consistency issue. Also, it is cumbersome because of the fact that you've got 30 different schools, and you have different needs, 30 different buildings. The needs are different in all of those, different in the high school than in an elementary school. Different type of staff, the variety of staff, from cafeteria workers to teachers to custodians to, psychologists, everything. So I find, so and so when you look at the whole thing, it seems it could be done more. It seemed like everything was bogged down. Everything seemed to, there was like a bottleneck coming down from all of these, think of every school and every building like an organization, and they're all coming down to the HR, and that's where the bottleneck was, so that's what I was visualizing in my head when I was thinking about the hiring process. But so it's slow, from everything that that we were told or that we researched, it seems that there were some departments that were very, very upset that the process is so slow for hiring. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Well, in some cases, it's all at the same time.
Right.
Yes.
You know, it's not only 30 different things all coming into one bottleneck, that's
Yeah.
all happening in a 6-week period. So,
Yeah.
when you're restaffing for the year. Mr. Hoey?
I just have one last
A
thing.
lot of the paperwork as well, too. Yeah.
I just have one last thing that I want to throw at you to see your opinion on it. I think one of the big issues is under ed reform, the superintendent has a lot more power when it comes to who can be hired.
Right.
And sometimes he'll make that decision, he or she will make that decision, and it brings a lot of friction. You know, we have a lot of fights over that also. So I didn't see too much about, the superintendent's powers, let's say, under ed reform in this audit, but I think it intersects HR work a lot. If we don't go out and do the right search or the right panels, and the superintendent just wants somebody, and they say that's the person they want, it's over. By law, it's kind of over. And I think that's a big issue in the city of Lowell, too. I didn't see much.
That's sort of more of a political, and we looked
It's
more.
political.
We looked at more of the core HR.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank
that
you.
was, yeah.
Thanks.
I don't know if there's anyone from I know Mr. Lay has joined us. If anyone would like to comment before we kind of wrap up, you can go right ahead.
I just have a quick question about the HRIS that you were talking about. I'm just curious about your opinion on the system that we have currently. How you rank it? Are we obsolete? Are we way behind the technology? And if you thought of, you probably have seen several different HRIS out there. And I'm just wondering, what are the good ones out there if what we have is not what you think is good for our school? If
Did
that
you want to
is-
answer that,
No.
John? Okay, I'll answer. So, okay, I'll have to excuse my back then.
okay.
Yes, I would say you are outdated, but you're not alone. Many school districts are, so if you look at what the private sector has with regard to technology, we don't even a lot of your processes are still paper, and it's really nice if you had an HRIS system, then you would know all the time and be connected to City Hall, so you know who's coming, who's going, who's getting a new computer, who's got the keys, who's giving back the keys to the office, So, and I guess from what I understand, the school education information that you have to input for DESE sometimes doesn't work with some of the other software, so it has to be input twice. So without listing all the categories, there's a huge benefit of having a human resource information system to be able to store all of the pay and the hirings, the comings, the goings, the desk that they're going to get, and and everybody being able to see that information at one time, just for updating job descriptions, for example. That's just a very basic thing, and having it all, tied together with the compensation and with the union contracts, and, wouldn't it be nice to be able to pull up a union contract, pull up the job description and the pay scale, and, so there's a lot of things that can be enhanced, and then also with onboarding, it will help with that. All the documentation that the new employees have to fill out, and the orientation. So there's so many categories with it that could help. But what I would recommend is when you get your new HR director, or you could even think about it now, think about what usually what communities do is they put together a team of department heads or users, and they will brainstorm the things that they need, and then they'll put out an RFI, request for information, and get quotes from different companies. And Munis is great, but there are other companies too, so I have to be careful not to be favorite one or the other. There are a lot of companies out there, but if you want it to be able to talk to your financial, HR and financial are so together, when you think about it, your payroll is the biggest part of your budget. So to have your HR talk with your finance is very important. So I hope I answered that. And excuse my back, wherever he went.
Any other comments as we wrap up? Okay. Well then, so we'll be looking at Wednesday evening to bring forward to the full committee the recommendations that have already been voted on in terms of the HR director search, as well as the recommendations from the HR audit. Thank you very much. It really was a huge help to have you both come and be able to kind of present in person. That I think was very helpful for myself, and I know for the committee, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And I would entertain a motion to adjourn by Mr. Hoey, seconded by Ms. Doherty. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand in adjournment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, great.